to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to tonight's forum for candidates seeking a seat in Congress to represent Missouri's 3rd District on the November 8th ballot. I'm Gary Castor, Managing Editor of the Jefferson City News Tribune, and I'll serve as moderator of tonight's forum. I want to take this opportunity to thank the city for the use of the council chambers for the forum, as well as their assistance in live streaming it. Some of our audience is watching this forum in person, some on our website. Seated next to me is Lane Strassner, News Tribune's Community Engagement Editor. She'll serve as timekeeper for the forum. 2 candidates are seeking the seat in Congress. Today, we were told that incumbent Representative Blaine Lukemeyer wouldn't be at tonight's forum, but we'll be proceeding with the challenger in the race. We anticipate the forum may last about 30 minutes, given that only one candidate will be answering the questions. So let me share with you the background of the candidates seeking the seat. Incumbent Blaine Lukemeyer, Republican, was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2009. He's a St. Elizabeth native and businessman with more than 30 years in the insurance and banking industries. He's the ranking Republican member of the House Committee on Small Business and Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, and also serves as a member of the House Financial Services Committee. Bethany Mann, a Democrat, is a newcomer to the political field. Originally from Forestell, she's a Brentwood mother and agricultural scientist whose career has consisted of implementing technology for industries and regulating them. She's put education, infrastructure, and healthcare at the forefront of her campaign. At this time, Bethany will have 1 minute for her opening statement.
Hello, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Lane. Thank you, Gary and the Jeff City Tribune for hosting this event. Most importantly, I want to say thank you to all of the constituents who are here. It's an honor to represent you. I think I count 12 or 13 counties here tonight, and I just thank you for your support. My name is Bethany Mann. I'm running for Congress in Missouri's 3rd District. Like he said, I'm from Forestell. I was primarily homeschooled for most of my education. I received a degree in chemistry from the University of Illinois in Springfield, and I started my career as an intern with the EPA. I tested water, soil, and air samples for heavy metal contaminants, kind of tripped and fell into the world of agriculture and manufacturing, and now I do a lot of work with water infrastructure, and basically just solving big chemistry problems with technology. My goal is to make Missouri a leader when it comes to important issues that build up the middle class. I believe in fair and collective bargaining rights for workers and farmers, advancing developments in infrastructure, fixing our healthcare system, and making sure every student has the opportunities to succeed in a fully and equitably funded public school.
Thank you. So we'll jump into our questions. So our first question, you'll have 2 minutes to answer, and Lane will kind of signal when we get close to that 2-minute point.
Wonderful.
Why are you running to represent the 3rd District in Congress?
Sure. I'm running to represent Missouri's 3rd District because I believe very strongly in the strength of Missouri's 3rd. I believe in the constituents. As I've traveled all around the district, I see residents who have big hopes and dreams and who do not feel that they're adequately represented by their congressperson, the one who did not choose to show up tonight. I believe that there are big problems from the economy to education and healthcare that need to be resolved. And instead of partisan bickering and finger pointing, I believe that it's up to us to come up with solutions that solve these bigger problems. And I think that we need a fresh set of eyes to be able to do that. And I hope to be able to represent Missouri's 3rd District with the dignity and the honor and the respect that it deserves.
All right. So Bethany, what's the biggest issue that you believe the 3rd District faces? And how would you try to address it if you were elected to Congress?
Sure. So one of the biggest issues that I see right now that I'm hearing from everybody is the issue of inflation in the economy. So families have a really hard time getting by, whether it's higher gas prices or higher grocery bills, higher energy costs. Regular working families are struggling. And the reason for that is that we have decided to not invest in the American workforce as inflation has risen, wages have not. We have issues with corporations dodging taxes and gaming the economy at the expense of American workers. And I believe it's time to step in and start investing in America again, in American infrastructure. And that includes especially the American people. So I believe in investments in agriculture, in technology, and education, and improving healthcare will go a long way to fix a lot of those problems. But it starts with respecting the American worker.
All right. So how would you grade America's economy? What steps should Congress take to improve the economy?
Well, if I were to give the economy a grade right now, I would give it about a D. We are still deep in the recovery of a COVID pandemic that wiped out some of our supply lines, that caused inflation and prices to rise for working families. The things that I propose are not simple problems. I mean, the inflation is a complex issue, right? So I don't think anybody thinks that there are simple fixes, but it goes back to making sure that we hold big corporations accountable for when they do things like price gouging. It means holding politicians accountable when they make decisions that don't respect American labor. So as far as my priorities when I'm in office, it's to make sure that we're making those investments, that the government money that gets allocated goes to the projects with which it's intended. So for example, infrastructure. We are allocating billions of dollars to fix our waterways and our roads. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives Missouri a D- for our infrastructure, and we can do a lot better than that. And it involves investing in ways that really impact families and their bottom line.
So do you believe President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act furthers that effort to improve the economy, or do you see there are issues with that approach?
We'll see some impact from the Inflation Reduction Act here within the next couple of years. I think it was a very strong step. I particularly like in that Inflation Reduction Act that he is raising the amount of money that people are going to receive in Social Security while putting caps on out-of-pocket expenses for Medicare. I think that that's really important, particularly for our seniors, and making sure that their health care costs come down. Another provision in the Inflation Reduction Act was putting a cap at insulin for $35 for people who have insurance. In a state where we have a lot of people who have diabetes and lots of high out-of-pocket costs, managing the costs of health care is really important and necessary. So I think if I'm going to give Biden a grade for what he's done so far with the economy, I think he's done probably a pretty solid B. There's still a lot to do. It's not comprehensive, but there's still, it's a good start for what we need to achieve.
All right. How would you assess the U.S. response to the pandemic? What did we do well? What did we not do so well?
That's a great question. We are doing much better now than we were several years ago. The initial response to the COVID pandemic was one of a lot of finger pointing and blame shifting, and as the result, many Americans died. We heard, we got bad information, misleading information from the government. There was not a very great strategy. And the unfortunate thing is I don't expect the people in office to have medical degrees and to be able to speak eloquently on science. They don't usually do that. But I do know that they get a lot of really sophisticated information on what's going on in different global markets. And I know for certain that before the COVID pandemic even reached the United States, we were seeing movement in the market and production over in China that indicated that plants were shutting down, that people were getting really sick, manufacturing was stopping, and that those things were going to impact the American economy. Now, instead of go in and warn us and say, hey, this thing looks really bad, we don't have all the answers, but here are some mitigating steps that you can take to protect yourself and your family. Instead, the representative who's not here tonight decided to tell his constituents that UV light kills COVID and just go to the lake. He had a duty to warn, and he failed to do so, and as a result, Americans died. I don't think that's acceptable. I think that if you are in a position of power, you have the duty to warn, and he certainly had more than enough opportunity to warn us. Instead, you had people delaying getting vaccines because they were getting bad information. You had vaccine distribution inadequately and unfairly stacked in different states and different regions. So I think the response to the pandemic was very poor and, in fact, alarmingly terrible. And I think that it could have been handled a lot better.
Okay. So what would you say recently President Biden declared that the pandemic was over? Do you ascribe to that theory, or what is your belief on that?
You know, I'm the type that I'm not so I don't pledge my allegiance to the party. I'm a scientist. I like to take in lots of different opinions and come up to my own conclusion, all that stuff backed on data. I don't believe that the pandemic is over. I think that we have better ways to handle it right now. I think we have a better handle on some of our supply chain. But I do really think that anyone who has the ability to should seek and get a vaccination, to stay current on their boosters if they can, to do what they can to mitigate the risks of themselves and their family. We still have a lot of immunocompromised people and people who will get really sick and hurt. Recently, I just read an article about how we've learned now that COVID attacks the placenta in pregnant moms, and it causes stillbirths among infants with people whose pregnancies are past 20 weeks. And that information needs to be communicated clearly to expectant moms so that we're saving lives and helping people, particularly with such high maternal death rates here in the state.
One of the real divides in the whole COVID response was when things should be open and closed. Mm-hmm. How do you think that was handled? From businesses to schools, what's your perspective on how that was handled?
It was handled poorly. I think that we had COVID emphasized a lot of vulnerabilities that we have in our infrastructure. One is the fact that we have a lot of buildings that are old and outdated and don't provide new and updated ventilation. There's technology that can kill viruses through air ducts, but we have nowhere near the implementation here in this country like we could. I think that ultimately the decision of whether or not you keep open your business is your choice, but you should be given good information so you can make informed choices. And that's where I think we were lacking, is our leaders decided not to give us good information, and instead they just kind of left us on our own to make those choices. And of course, if you've got a family to support and a family to feed, and the way that you do that is through your small business, of course you want to keep it open. But then again, you have immunocompromised and vulnerable people who are also getting the same news too, and they still need to survive as well. So you put people in this horrible situation where they have to decide on whether or not they're going to participate in family birthday parties or even go to the grocery store, and how they do so safely, and worry about whether or not they're going to die, their family's going to die, or their family's going to be at risk. So.
Okay. Let's go to your next question. Sure. Are you in favor of the student debt forgiveness plan that's out there? Why or why not?
I am in favor of the student loan forgiveness plan. I believe that we bailed out the big banks. We bailed out Wall Street. We bailed out the auto manufacturing sector, and it's time that American college students and those who went through their educational system get that same relief too. One thing I think that is overlooked is many of these student loan companies have bought and sold these loans many times, meaning that this debt is unfortunately artificially inflated. It's been bought and sold so many times that the principal balances aren't even paid for. In addition to that, many students who were lenders had their loans placed into forbearance without being given information on what that would mean for the compounding interest that was being added to their student loans. It also means that that they weren't properly informed. And that they really didn't have a choice. So by no fault of their own, people have accumulated this debt. And it's not just like, hey, I loaned $40,000 from the bank, I need $40,000 back. I'm hearing stories of people who have lended, who sought out loans for $40,000, but now their loans are up to $80,000. And they're like, well, I've been diligently paying every month, but it's only going to the interest, it's not the principal. So yes, I'm in support of it. I think many of those loans were made predatorially, and it's due because of our lack of regulation of the banking industry. And so I think in order to fix what's happening, a bailout's not the ultimate solution. The ultimate solution is to fix the system so that American consumers aren't caught having to bail each other out time and time again. It's time for more corporate regulation and the ways of just making sure that consumers are protected from some of these market shocks. And I think the student loan forgiveness plan really helps with that.
Okay, so those who are opposed to the plan might say, so it was no fault of their own of the college students. They knowingly signed a financial document that they would have to pay that money back.
Sure.
And so I guess my question is, what would you say to them as well as to those who perhaps didn't go to college and yet they will be the ones paying for that debt? I mean, the money just doesn't, it has to be paid, right?
Right.
So what would you say to those folks?
Well, what I say to those folks is we need to make we need to fix the root cause and not penalize people for trying to make a better life for themselves. I mean, I've taken out student loans. I know that process. I know that they try to explain to you how much money you'll make when you get out of graduation. That number is never close to what you make when you get out of college at all. But the other thing too is you're signing these loan terms. You have people who may not have a whole high level of education if they don't come from generational wealth, and they're signing terms and conditions that aren't properly explained to them and that come in a big thick stack of papers. And I don't know about you, but I don't always read the fine print, and a lot of people don't. And unless you're trained to, or you have a family lawyer who can review those terms for you, then you're really kind of sticking yourself into a trap of poverty without realizing it. And I think that people should be rewarded for trying to make their lives better and not penalized. And I hear what people are saying. I mean, nobody, you do need to take personal responsibility for anything that you put your name on. But if you're working with a system that deliberately tries to deceive and charges you interest rates, knowing full well that you'll probably default on that loan, it means that the system is betting against you, and I think that that's wrong.
Okay, so let's go to the root of the problem, so the high cost of higher education.
Yeah.
How should that be addressed?
Well, one of the ways that we can address the higher cost of education is I think that we need to make sure that certain types of schooling, I believe in pre-K to secondary education, 2 years of community college, should be publicly funded. And we can fund that through a whole host of different ways. One of them is making sure that corporations pay their fair share in taxes. I think that to lower the cost of higher education, you need to make investments in your public school infrastructure, and that does include public universities. And when you have programs that are government funded, then you're in a whole realm of where you have to, you've got to bid fairly for that work, and it creates more competition. And if you want to send your kids to a private school that's more expensive because you have the means, please do. But please make sure that public education is readily and handily accessible for everybody. By negotiating the cost of education, the government can drive costs down.
Okay. Both sides of the political spectrum have acknowledged that there is a crisis at the border
Sure.
when it comes to illegal immigration. What do you believe the best solution is to resolve that crisis?
I agree. We do have a broken immigration system. It is not, nobody comes with simple answers. I think catchphrases like build a wall is a lot easier than actually meaningfully seeking solutions to make things better. I think that we need to make sure that everybody we're America, we're the city on the hill, we're the nation that everybody aspires to come to make their lives better, right? And we need to make sure that people who seek asylum here are treated with dignity and respect. We need to make sure that we are investing in technologies that make border cargo ships and trucks that are coming across the border, making sure that they have the technology to see what's in those packages, to make sure that we can stop some of the flow of some of the harder drugs that are coming in through our borders. It's also important to acknowledge that some of those drugs don't just come through the border crossing; they come through port cities and coasts. And it doesn't sound as sexy to build a wall around the oceanfront ports in Florida to keep drugs from coming in. It's easier to blame those problems on people who are already having a hard time, that don't already have means. The real way to solve the solution is to hold the wealthy people accountable who traffic people and who are bringing the crime into the area. Other ways that we can cut down on crime as it crosses the border, we can make sure that we federally legalize cannabis, and so we stop drug cartels from profiting off of a medicine that's in demand here in the U.S.
So a lot of your answer was focused on the drugs coming across the border, but
Sure.
but there's also just an overwhelming volume of people,
Sure.
and some would argue not even being stopped. So what is the approach to handle that? Because you have border cities who are overwhelmed with it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that we need to make sure that we have faster ways to process people who are seeking asylum or crossing the border. I think we also need to make sure that Congress fully funds the judges that sit on the bench so we can quickly process people. Immigration and undocumented immigration brings billions of dollars to the U.S. economy, so I believe that we need to have a strong pipeline for people to come into the country and immediately go to work. And we also need to make sure that detention facilities or places families are being held are ensuring that families stay together throughout this whole process, that nobody is separated, and that everybody who comes into this country is treated with dignity and respect, because that's how Americans treat those who come here for safe refuge.
All right. In light of the overturning of Roe versus Wade by the Supreme Court, what laws would you support regarding abortion?
Sure. So first thing I want to make clear is abortion is health care, and access to health care saves lives. In a state where we have very high maternal mortality rates, people need more access to health care and not less. As it stands, we have people who are driving hours right now for basic medical care, and that includes preventative care like seeing an OBGYN. When I'm driving around in the district, I could be hours from a trauma hospital that even has an OBGYN and a doctor. So that makes just being a pregnant woman really difficult in this state. Things that I suggest that we do to protect and defend people's rights to health care is I believe that we need to codify we need to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, which would effectively secure abortion access as health care for everyone. I believe that we need to meaningfully ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. It's far time that people stop getting discriminated against because they seek health care. I think that it needs to be accessible for all. I think that we need to pass Medicare for all. I think that we need to make sure that everyone has access to health care and that they're not discriminated against. And finally, I think that we need to pass the PRO Act. I think that's an important piece of legislation that that supports American workers, because the issue of abortion isn't actually an issue of saving the babies. It's actually a political movement that was coordinated by the anti-labor movement. In the 70s and 80s, a group of lobbyists and politicians got together and thought, how do we pit the American people together? So they came up with a couple of different test-marketed ideas. They talked about the gay rights. They talked about anti-pornography campaigns. The one thing that was so polarizing and that they were able to use as an emotionally manipulated tool was to say, hey, these people don't like babies over here. And so it's not an issue of sanctity of life at all. It's about dividing the American workforce so that we don't notice that they're gaming the system to make as much profit as they can on the backs of our labor.
So, excuse me. Please stop. Would you support any sort of legislation that would limit abortion?
Yeah, I think that your doctor's office is too small for you, your doctor, a politician, an administrator, and a lawyer to make decisions regarding your care. I trust those healthcare decisions to women, to people who are seeking that medical care, and to the doctors who provide their care. Doctors are already governed by legislative bodies to make sure that they don't have malpractice. I really don't think that we need additional levels of restriction when it comes to people's health care, especially their private health care.
Okay. When it comes to the Second Amendment, what limits, if any, would you place on gun rights? Explain your answer.
Sure. I support the Second Amendment, but I don't support the Second Amendment over the lives of second graders. I believe that most gun owners support common sense gun legislation, things like safe storage laws to make sure that weapons are put up in safe places. I also believe in taxing the sale of firearms to generate revenue. I believe that there should be insurance riders for certain weapons that would include background checks. I believe in extending the wait times between a time somebody wants to buy a high-capacity weapon and the time that they acquire them. And I do support an assault weapons ban. I think if you have to make 3 shots at anything out in the woods, you don't belong to be, you don't deserve to be out there shooting at anything.
All right. At this point, let's let you have your closing statement. You'll have a minute for your closing statement.
Sure. Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody who showed up in support today. And I want to thank the Jeff City Tribune. I think that you guys do important work. I think that forums like this, where our ideas are heard, are fundamental to a functioning democracy. And I believe that our democracy should be strengthened and protected, and that our vote is the best way to make our vote heard. And I believe that we should strengthen and defend and expand the rights to vote to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to cast a ballot, have that ballot properly recorded, and have their voice heard. I would like to say thank you, and I hope that I've said something that caused you to think about voting for me. It would be an honor to earn your vote, and I appreciate the time that you all have given to me to express some of my opinions. I believe that it would be a great honor to represent all of you here in Missouri's 3rd District. I mean, just looking at this gallery, I think we have at least 12 or 13 counties represented, and that really speaks to the strength of everybody here. So thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting me, and thank you for giving me a platform to say what I believe.
So on behalf of the News Tribune, I would like to thank you for participating in the forum. I'd again like to thank the city for their assistance in broadcasting it. In addition to stories about this forum, in tomorrow's News Tribune, we'll have a variety of other means by which you, the voters, can become more informed about the race. We'll be asking candidates questions that we didn't get to tonight. They'll be emailed those questions and asked to respond to them. Those answers will then appear in upcoming issues of the News Tribune. Readers can engage in questioning themselves. They can send us the questions, and we will send them to the candidates. Our email is vote@newstribune.com. At these forums, I'm always reminded that our society is served best by an informed and active electorate. So I would encourage you to take advantage of these resources, get to know the candidates, and then get out to vote on November 8th. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.